can't do that in a conventional agriculture system because it just doesn't make sense. You can't till a tree into the ground. You definitely wouldn't want to wait 20 years to do it. So that's one of the things, putting nitrogen-fixing trees into the system. The other things are nutrient accumulating or nutrient cycling mulch plants. They also call them dynamic accumulators or bioaccumulators. Essentially, it's plants that grow really well in really not so good conditions. So these are the plants that, if you see a plant that's growing in an abandoned orange grove and it's taking over the orange grove, that's probably a nutrient accumulating plant because it's finding nutrients in places that if you planted a watermelon seed or a kale seed, the kale would go, there's nothing here, I'm going to die. And this plant goes, thank you, and it produces these huge, bushy, this is Mexican sunflower. Mexican sunflower, you can plant it straight in the sand. You can just break off a piece of it and stick it in the sand, and it's going to grow these beautiful, lush leaves. It doesn't produce any of its own food. It produces carbon from the atmosphere, and you can use that to add the organic matter to the soil. But it's mining for nutrients. It's mining deep for nutrients. So you're cycling nutrients. This is an alley crop system that someone uses. You can see this is a some kind of nitrogen-fixing tree. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but they're using it as a mulch onto an annual bed. This is comfrey. Comfrey has a large taproot that goes down. A lot of the nutrient accumulators that we like to use have taproots because they're able to go down and find nutrients that other plants wouldn't necessarily have access to, and they bring them back up to the surface. They fall on the surface, and we can support microbial life and the different things that provide the nutrients to our plants. I have another section here that I can either skip or not skip. Based on what time it is. Oh, geez, I have plenty of time. Okay, good. Oh, yes, this is a fun one. So integrated pest management is a term that is used in conventional agriculture. I took an IPM class with the Extension Center, which is a great resource, the Extension Center. I'm friends with the ag agent, and she gets me into some classes for free. They're really, really fun to learn from. And that's what got me to be able to take this picture from my garden. So they have all these practices that they use in conventional agriculture to help control pests. And integrated pest management is a term that they use that mostly speaks of like biological pest management or natural pest management or using existing species or things like that to help combat pests. There's a lot of different ways that they do it. But one of them is using beneficial insects and beneficial biological life to control the pests in your garden, which I was very happy. They sent a plant home that has, I'll tell you about a banker plant system since I have time. A banker plant is something that they use in greenhouses, in the greenhouse industry, and also in agriculture. And they'll use something like a crepe myrtle or some sort of milkweed, and they'll infest it with aphids. And this will be an aphid that doesn't hurt. They do a lot of research. A lot of research goes into these plants that they use for these reasons. So milkweed has an aphid that lives on it that is called the milkweed aphid, and it only eats milkweed. So you can put a milkweed you can put an aphid-infested milkweed in the middle of your garden, and you don't have to worry about the aphids getting onto your plants. But the reason why you would put an infested plant in the middle of your garden is because there are a lot of things that eat these pests that we have. They're part of the food chain. And if we have a large monoculture system and it's completely sterile because we go through and spray the entire thing, that means there's no bad pests. There's also no good pests. The bad pests are very fast moving and they spread very rapidly. The good pests, I don't know if I said that right, the bad pests move fast. The good pests take a while to establish populations, and there has to be food source there for them. So if we keep them all sterile, all of a sudden a few aphids fly in, they're going to multiply extraordinarily fast, and they're going to take over the entire grove, and they're going to to hit some sort of critical mass where it doesn't matter how many beneficial insects you bring in, they're not going to be able to eat them all. So the key is to have an existing population of beneficial insects, so when that one aphid comes in, he gets eaten. He never gets a chance to hit that exponential growth curve that causes him to annihilate an entire system. So that's another part of the resiliency, is having biological diversity in your system. So I brought this plant home. This isn't a picture from that plant, but it was something similar. This is a more exciting picture for a couple reasons. These are aphids. This is a living aphid, which miraculously, when I took the picture, there's an ant milking the aphid. The ants aren't beneficial. They actually they help the aphids. They farm the aphids. It's really crazy. They will come up in the cold seasons. They'll take aphid eggs, and bring them down into their nest, and they'll protect them over the winter and carry them back up to the leaves in the summer to let them live out a nice, happy life. And they also walk around them and protect them. They chase off the beneficial insects. But what they get in return is when the aphid is sitting there eating, the ant will come up and shake the aphid, which is sucking the plant sugars out of the plant, and he'll spill the plant sugars. So they call it milking them. They spill the plant sugars, and then the ants eat the plant sugars. And that's also the reason why you end up with sooty mold on your plants, because the plant sugars get released, and then the mold also eats the plant sugars. So this is a living aphid that's being milked by an ant. This is a beneficial fungus that eats aphids. So there's a fungus that will eat aphids. And that's what's happening right there. This ant is losing his crop, I can tell you. He is having a horrible time in his farming efforts right now, because the rest of the plant is completely covered by parasitized and dead aphids. This is an aphid that's been parasitized by a wasp. So if you see an aphid that's brown and like swollen up like a balloon, that means that a wasp came, and I'm going to show you pictures. This wasp, which this is a magnifying glass, whoop, not that wasp. This wasp, this is magnified, it's the size of a gnat. I had a picture of it on my finger, I guess I didn't put it in here. And you can see this one and that one. You can see those two have like a little hatch on the back. That's where the wasp hatched out of it. And I just took that off a leaf and I saw it, but I've also taken a leaf that has parasitized aphids on it and put it in a jar and let them hatch. The wasp came out. All of them hatched and they came out. So if you see an aphid that's brown and swollen and dried out looking, it has a wasp in it. Like I've put them in bottles and seen them. They come out. This is your run-of-the-mill wasp. I was in the garden and he grabbed a caterpillar, a full-size caterpillar, and carried him off to a yucca leaf and sat there and ate him. He just picked the caterpillar off and ate him. And I watched the whole thing happen. So these things happen like this, if you just go out there and see them. And the reason they do is because there's stuff, this is the grocery store for these bugs. They come and they live and they establish populations in these areas. So you have a diverse ecosystem. So if you're a homeowner or you're a small-scale gardener that can grow diverse, dynamic ecosystems that produce food, take that luxury, because large crop growers, commercial agriculture farmers, they can't do this because they're restricted by the level of production that they're required, that they have to maintain to make a profit, and they're restricted by the easeability of harvesting. So we don't have those restrictions. Don't use a system that makes huge compromises because of those restrictions if you don't have them. Use this system, you know? So a few ways that you can attract the beneficial. So this is a reason, you know, this is the one thing something that I did when I first designed my first system was like, I want all edible plants. Like I want a garden that like everything is edible, and like I just want to be able to walk through it and eat the leaves off of everything. Well, that's good, but you need your nitrogen fixers, you know, and you need your nutrient accumulating crops. You need the stuff that's going to help to build the soil. By planting a lot of nitrogen fixers, you know, that process that I was talking about on top of the mountain that grows soil over time, we can optimize that system to where, you know, it depends on the climate. It would be infinitely many years to establish 2 feet of topsoil because it's just never going to happen. But it can take hundreds or thousands of years to establish inches of topsoil in a natural system. We can make that happen more quickly by planting the right plants in the right densities, cycling the nutrients really fast, covering them. I'll get a little bit more actually into that at the end of how to optimize your use of mulching plants. I think it's on here. If it's not, I'll just mention it afterwards. But okay, so beyond the nitrogen fixtures and dynamic accumulators, this integrated pest management, or pretty much providing food in homes for these beneficial insects, you want flowering plants, you want flowers, you want native flowering plants, and you also want plants that they use in the IPM systems, in the integrated pest management systems. Crepe myrtles are one of the best ones. Crepe myrtles have a crepe myrtle aphid. It's creatively named, just like all the other aphids that are specific to plants, because that's the only thing they live on. So if you have crepe myrtle aphids, they're not going to spread your gardens, and they're going to maintain a population of, like, okay, so I didn't mention ladybugs. Ladybugs eat aphids, just straight up. They lay larvae on the eggs, and the eggs hatch, and the larvae crawl around before they even turn into ladybugs and eat the aphids. And then once they turn into ladybugs, they eat the aphids. So they're great to have. If you order them online, from what I was told, this integrated pest management class is that those are all bred up north. There's no Florida breeders of ladybugs. When you let them go, they fly back north. So just attract the native ones. So you want to grow crepe myrtles in your system. The milkweed that I was talking about, I mean, it supports monarchs, pollinators, and it has its own aphid, like I was saying. Whitefly, another one. So whiteflies, a huge problem. They're having really bad problems with whiteflies in a lot of places. Whiteflies also have a parasitic wasp. They also have a mite that eats whiteflies. I think there's a fungus that eats whiteflies, or the larva or something that takes over their eggs. So, unfortunate thing is that, as far as I know, there's no whiteflies that are specific to a single plant that you can help to establish a population. So if you introduce whiteflies in your garden, there's a chance that they're going to spread your other plants. But that is fine, because if you have enough predators for them, they shouldn't take over. These large-scale epidemics, or the diseases and these problems that spread all the way across the country, the citrus greening, things like that, it's because of the monoculture system. It's because they have just huge amounts of host plants and material that it's like a heyday, So if you have the luxury of growing a diverse system, you will get the benefit of these wasps that come through. Papayas host whiteflies, peppers host whiteflies. So you want to have, the key is, if you have a particular pest, you want a plant in your garden at all times, at least one plant that's going to host that pest all year. So you can have so that the beneficial pest can trust that they can live in your yard without having to go look elsewhere. Same with the bees. You want your stop to be a regular stop on the errand list of the bees. And you do that by having year-round pollinators. So you want something flowering in every single season. Actually, now I'm at this section that I thought I was at. So I'm going to skip that section and then come back to it if we have time. So kind of a conclusion. No, I'll conclude with you. I'll just briefly explain it. I was going to explain one other component of a permaculture design, tenet of the design, is having a closed loop system. And what this, I don't want to skip this, it's important. So conventional agriculture, they're mainly focused on an economic loss profit. It's really the only thing factored into it. If they're going to make money on the crop and if it can sell and things like that. I mean, and they don't want to completely degrade the place and have it turn into a desert because they don't want to be broke next year. But but it's generally an economic focus. So permaculture, it considers ecological profit and loss. And that's, like I said, on the immediate system, that's loss to the ecosystem. So you want this ecosystem to be supporting. So you're designing a community, you're designing a business that's running as an ecosystem. You also are considering a larger global ecosystem. So we're always considering the renewability of the materials that we have to source. And we're also considering for how long are we going to have to source these materials. I could go out into, I kind of want to do this experiment. You could probably take a concrete slab and have some walls on it and then plant some stuff and grow some algae and eventually develop the whole thing into a soil. Or you could go out into Florida sand and plant some nitrogen-fixing beans and some ground covers and some potatoes and slowly grow the soil and chop and drop trees and mulch them and eventually grow soil. But that's going to take years because plants grow in seasons and we can't speed it up. You can only chop and drop a plant as fast as it grows. So we will bring sources of materials in. So considering the renewability of those materials is one of the design tenets. Also, the progression of the system, once you get the necessary nutrients into the system, we want to limit our future input. So as the system evolves, your maintenance goes down, your external inputs should go down, and you should have, and the ways that you do this is that you want minimal loss. So we're designed to keep our nutrients. We don't want to lose the nutrients. There's different ways to do this, such as swales, to keep the water from running off. There's only a few ways that you lose nutrients. It's through leaching down into the soil and going into the water system, or it's just washing off the property. So we want to decrease the loss of nutrients. The ways that we do that are capturing the water and the nutrients as they try to run off. We do use ground covers. Organic matter in the soil holds on to nutrients. If you have just sand, any nutrients that goes in there is going to wash out. So there's different properties to organic matter that hold on to soil, hold on to nutrients. One of them is, what do they call it? The wicking. It's just like a sponge. It essentially just holds it like a sponge. Another one is anion-cation exchange, which is essentially just like molecular magnetism. Certain nutrients are polarized, either positive or negative, and certain pieces of organic matter are polarized, either positive or negative, and they cling to each other. It's also, nutrients are held in the organic matter itself because it contains the nutrients and it's not water soluble until it gets broken down by biological life, something in the animal kingdom or the fungus family or something. And the other way is biological life itself. The microfauna, the small bacteria, the protozoa, the archaea, and the nematodes. There's a lot of good nematodes. The earthworms, everything. Those are all made up of nutrients and things. So a lot of the nutrients are stored in there. So percentage organic matter in the soil is one of the largest indicators of soil health. It's not the only thing, because different organic matter is different, but the more organic matter you have, the more soil health you're going to have, the more nutrient retention you're going to have. So you want to increase your organic matter, you want ground cover. So these are some of the ways that we conserve nutrients. Water is also something that we want to conserve because we want to limit the water that we're putting in because we're considering the source of the water. It's coming out of the aquifer. The more water we use in these agricultural systems, which is one of the largest users of water, it depletes the aquifer and salt comes in and sinkholes form and so we have those things on our mind when designing the system, so we want to design for nutrient retention, or for water retention. And the ways we do that are pretty much the same, because the way that you lose nutrients is once it turns water soluble, it leaves with the water. Nutrients don't leave without water. So, let's go ahead.
You're talking about minimizing external inputs, and then you're talking about how basically what I'm looking at is like mining. If you're growing produce, for example, you're essentially mining the soil. Or even if you're raising some kind of grazing animals and you're selling the meat or other products, you're essentially mining the soil. So I was just wondering.
Yeah, oh yeah, so the other way to lose nutrients is harvesting. So you're always going to have harvesting loss. That's a good point. So your harvesting loss is if you're growing a ton of leafy vegetables or you're growing sugarcane and cutting the whole thing off and the whole system down, you're exporting all of your nutrients as harvest. You're losing it in that way. So if you have a single family system, this isn't popular to talk about, but returning the composted material that's been composted by humans and animals back to the system is very important, very, very important. And a lot of our nutrients is contained in urine, also contained in feces. Most of it is contained in urine. And those things are put into a toilet which flushes and goes miles away and gets leached out and dumped onto a leaching bed to where it's in sand and it goes directly into the aquifer and into the spring system. We don't like that as a whole systems design approach. That's not cool. So we want to consider those things, but there's limitations as far as policy that we're not allowed to have compost toilets yet. So we have to, convince people of the benefits and be able to come up with designs that make them safe and acceptable. Yeah. So nutrient loss. That's enough of that section. That covers it good enough for me. So in summary, permaculture is a full system design approach with a stated environmental agenda. Is kind of the way that I would like to put it. And permaculture, it'll pull from any example or science that's out there. It's been called a science by some people. I don't understand that. It pulls from any science, though. It also totally, me as a person that practices permaculture design principles and approaches, I am happy to work with any other design field that's out there, such as ecological engineering is an evolving design field that you'll see in some universities at this point. Agroforestry is one. Indigenous forest cultivation is an example that we're happy to pull from. Urban design, creative urban design, rooftop gardening, like all these things are full system design approaches that are very good to work with, and they're not separate from permaculture, and they're not owned by permaculture, they're not part of permaculture. It's just other things, And let's see, biological remediation is another one of them that they deal heavily with the kind of stuff that the problems that we're interested in solving. And my hopes is that permaculture will not need to be a word that exists in the future, because hopefully every type of design will be a full systems design where we're considering the long-term sustainability of the system. So it's a permanent design system that essentially, if the Earth was, there's always a chance of a meteor hitting it or something, but if it's designed correctly in a natural system, it can just kind of go on and on and on and on and on forever. So hopefully we can just design our system to where we're just a part of that Earth thing that just goes on and on and on forever, and we wouldn't call a design permaculture, as a whole systems design. We would just call that life or designing or engineering or whatever we're doing. So that's it. So does anyone have any questions?
That concrete you pointed out makes the green manure and the poultice for wounds. It's a very good sponsor for predaceous spiders and other insects as a third use. You were speaking of the ladybugs running away from a lot of people detest that dog fennel. I had it in my mind. It was a pain in the neck. Most people chop it down. It sponsors the ladybugs. They tend to stay where there's a good patch of dog. And I'll be speaking a lot on
beneficial insects.
beneficial and companion plants. I think it's June, Shirley? Probably next month. I can't remember if it's June or July. And I'll be covering a lot of more basic gardening, so everybody gets the holistic grasp that he's given. Matt's way up there on the.
Thank you, Matt.
So to make a few plugs, if you're interested in getting involved in permaculture, we do, oh, good.
Matt, you had said something about retaining as much moisture and water that you can. And this is another way that, the people can actually take their own garbage, and whenever it's converted into worm castings, castings will hold three to four times their dry weight in moisture. So you do not have to water as much, and so that it retains moisture, which is also very beneficial too. And I liked your explanation about the cation exchange capacity, because that also is something that we are very interested in, because we want our plants to be able to get what they need. And the rock dust patterns has a real big effect on that.
Yeah, I haven't looked into that yet, the
Yeah,
toughness patterns.
yeah. Love for you to come out to the farm.
Cool. I'll likely come out there one day.
Okay.
One other thing I did want to mention, and this is something that I had confusion about for a while, and I think I have kind of an understanding of it. Another way that we lose nutrients, and something that gets talked about a lot in permaculture, is chop and drop with these mulch plants. One of the ways that we lose, Tom Carey has talked about it before, one of the ways that we lose carbon or soil organic matter in Florida is through oxidation, which is essentially a slow, steady burning, just from the sun beating down on it. So if you were to pull a bunch of green leaves off the concrete and lay it on top of your ground, it would just get shriveled up, all the moisture would evaporate out of it, and the carbon would go off, a lot of the carbon would go off into the atmosphere. So one of the ways to retain carbon and nutrients is that when you chop these green plants down, you either want to cover them with some sort of carbony material like leaf or something, leaves or wood chips or something like that. The same principle of composting. You want to cover the top of it. So you cover that, or the other thing is shade. So if you have a ground cover or an overstory, then you're not going to lose it as much through oxidation. So if you just think, oh, I'm doing this thing that they tell me to chop and drop these mulch, and you just chop everything down and lay it on the ground, it's still better than not doing that, but, yeah, that's something else to consider. Does anyone else have any questions?
Do you have any recommendations for ground cover that are nitrogen fixers?